again to the Iron City Roundhouse Report, the podcast where the love for the high iron meets the precision of the scale model. Whether you're tracking the latest Class 1 freight movements or perfecting the scenery on your home layout, we're here to celebrate the history and hobby of railroading. Climb aboard and settle in as we clear the signals for another journey through the world of trains. Hello once again, Iron City N Scalers and those of other scales. We're glad to have you with us for another episode of the Iron City Roundhouse Report. We have a couple things going on with this one. Our main guest for the evening is Ron Marsh from Ron's Trains and Things. We'll get into more about him a little bit later. But to kick the show off, we have another special guy with us who's been with us several times before. We'd like to introduce once again our good friend Todd Treaster, who's going to be here to co-host the Roundhouse Report portion of this podcast. So welcome, Todd. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here.
And also, as always, we have Pat Moore, the full-time co-host. Pat, glad to have you here.
Hey, Brad. Good evening. How you doing?
I'm good. I had a little bit of a tiring, long day, but it's good to be here broadcasting once again.
Yeah, Brad, really good show. So good that we're going to have to make this a two-parter. This will be episode 5, and we'll have an episode 6 with Ron. Ron is has great discussions, and we really wanted to get into Ron's modeling. So we'd asked him a lot of questions about his layout and what he's doing with his layout. So that's going to be our first portion, our part 1. And then Brad, he's the king of social media with his YouTube channel and some other things that he does. So we wanted to talk about his social media. So we're going to make that part 2. And I think Brad and I had Brad, what'd you think? A really good discussion with Ron on these subjects.
Yeah. I thought it was an awesome show. He's always fun to talk to and has a lot of good information. And if you've never been to his YouTube channel, it's definitely worth checking out. He's got a lot of good tips. He calls them tips, tools, and techniques, I believe, and that's basically the main thrust of what he talks about on there. He also shares, of course, pictures from his layout, which is what we're going to talk to him about this evening on this podcast. Is his modeling experience, the history of his modeling experience, and also a little bit about his current layout, which is a work in progress. So I agree, Pat. It was a interesting discussion. So interesting that a single episode could not contain it. So we will be doing this over 2 episodes.
So Brad, with that and our special guest tonight, Todd, let's go ahead and go into the Roundhouse Report. What do you say?
Sounds good to me. Do you want to start it off?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go first tonight. Brad, my first one's going to be Andrew Hopkins. Andrew has done a fence, and it's HO, but he scratch built this from styrene and sewing thread. And I'm telling you, it's a like a barbed wire fence or a wired fence for a farm. And let me tell you, man, it is outstanding work. I was very pleased with that, and it's just really well done. And I'm glad to see that he's starting to post a lot onto our page. Brad, we always say it doesn't matter if you're in scale, HOO. We just want to see great modeling on our page. It always really helps and allows us to kind of use these ideas for our own layouts. And you can never go wrong with good modeling and posting on our page. So that's my first one for this evening.
Yeah, it was really good to see an HO scale modeler share their stuff. So we'll reiterate that once again. If you are in one of the other scales, one of the larger ones, or even one of the smaller scales compared to N scale, you are more than welcome to share your work. We like to see modeling in any scale. So if you're a member of the Iron City Facebook page, you feel free to show us what you're doing and show off your stuff. So great job by Andrew Hopkins there, and thank you for sharing that. I noticed, in addition to that really awesome fence that he made, he did some work with some static grass on that section of his layout too. And I think the overall effect for that scene came out really good. So thanks again to Andrew for sharing that on the Facebook page. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, Brad, what do you have for us this evening?
All right, mine is about my good buddies at the Clinton Central Model Railroad Club. In From the date that this airs, this will air. What would it be, Pat? March 11th, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Somewhere in there. The Clinton Central Model Railroad Club spring train meet is on March 22nd. So 11 days after this podcast airs, the club, which is based in Castania, Pennsylvania, will be once again having our swap meet, train show, and T-track layout at the Woodward Township Volunteer Fire Company, First Street, Linden, Pennsylvania. And that will be again on March 22nd. That's a Sunday from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And if you're in the area and would like to come and check that out, there's vendors there. And then, like I said, we have a T-track layout display, which the kids and adults always seem to enjoy seeing the trains run on that. We've even had our good friend Fran Resch come all the way down from New England a few times to participate in that with us. So it's always a good time. It's a smaller show compared to some of the really big ones, but there are a pretty good collection of vendors. There's a couple in particular that always have some nice N scale stuff for you N scalers, but there's stuff there for all the scales. There's also crafts too as part of this show. So if you are interested in stopping by and you're in central Pennsylvania, come and see us at the Woodward Township Volunteer Fire Company Hall. Admission is $3 for adults, and children under 14 are free. So always enjoy participating in that with those guys from Iron City East and the Clinton Central. And we'd love to have as many people who are within a decent driving distance of Central PA show up and join us for that.
Well, that's a good one. If I remember correctly, last year, I think you guys went live to show us some video of the trains running that you guys had last year. So,
yeah, I'm sure one of us will probably do that. Either I can do it, or I think it might have even been our buddy Nick Wummer who went live for a while at the last show. So, yeah, we'll make sure to have somebody have a tower cam or something set up so
excellent.
you can share the layout running.
Okay.
So that was mine.
Okay, Todd, what do you have for us this evening?
Well, let me see. There's so many things running through my head right now. I'm not sure which to even pick from, but you mentioned, is that Andrew Hopkins? Is that his name? That you said?
Yes.
Yes.
You said about the static grass. That's something I've never really tried, but I did stumble upon his video or pictures that he had of it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to try this. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to learn how to do some static grass here. And I have an applicator somewhere, but
do you have one?
Well, I had one. It's somewhere here in the land of Oz down here, but so I just ordered another one and I got it this week. So
cool.
Oh,
I'll find it.
I was gonna say I have one, but speaking of my good buddy Nick, I believe he still has mine. He borrowed it. And I told him he could just bring it the next time we ran trains here, but it's been so long since we've done that so no worries, Nick. I'll get it back for you at some point. But yeah, static grass, there's definitely a learning curve to it, Todd, but it does.
Yeah, I'm not sure where I want to practice at. Someplace that if I screw it up, I can redo it. But
I always just take
so many guys that do it. It's just, I mean, it looks really good, So
that I could learn how to do it, I just took a piece of like blue foam and painted it, and then just started trying to apply static grass to that because
I think that's what I'm going to throw.
I knew I was just going to throw it away when I was done. But I believe there's another. Speaking of events, I think there might be another event that we should probably talk about here too.
Yeah, I think that's coming up April the 11th, possibly.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, Todd.
All right. So tonight here we'll talk about the April 11th, the second annual rally in Burnham, hosted by the NYSNA and the Iron City Iron City group from the N-Scale group from Pittsburgh. So it should be a pretty good event with the T-tracks in the garage, and of course we got the layout downstairs, and there'll be plenty of food to eat, of course, as always. So we hope that everybody can come and enjoy it, and I think we're going to have a pretty good time.
And Todd, how we did the format last year, I wasn't physically there, but you and I had a brainstorm with Brad about the rally, and that is we were going to try to operate and do operations on the T track because it's not a display. It's going to actually be a working operational T-track this time. And then
Yeah.
people can go downstairs, and that's where you're going to, really display maybe the longer trains, and people can see your layout. And that's
Yeah.
more of a display downstairs, more
Yeah,
operations.
we will have, if somebody wants to do it, I now have the capability of running some locals out of Enola West to Lewistown and drop cars and pick cars up and bring them back. And the last couple shows we had here, guys did it, and it worked out pretty good. It took them an hour and a half to get the train out of Enola over to Lewistown, run around it, do its thing, and come back.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So
now, Todd, tell me a little bit about. Remember, you were working on the mill, and you did a video for us. And haven't got the follow up yet. How's that coming along?
Well, it was kind of dormant for a while because I got so many things going on, but the mill buildings are physically off the layout again. In fact, they're setting on the floor in 2 different places, and I'm getting ready to. I got the track all laid, and I'm getting ready to do the background behind it. That's why I want to learn the static grass and do more trees. I got 400 trees out in the garage ready to be painted.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to pollute that background there with it and the track that's along the back. And I get that back part of it done, then I can start setting the buildings in place. The electric furnace is done. It's lighted. There's about a dozen or so LEDs on it. And then the blast furnace will be last. I'm going to do the rolling mill next because it's pretty easy to do. It's already assembled and painted and ready to go. All I got to do is just add some overhead lights in it, and we'll get that baby going. But yeah, the track's all in, and I don't know if we're going to be operational to get trains down in or drop cars at Steel Mill or not for the rally. But by next fall, the September show, probably will have something done for that. So.
And Todd, did you went ahead and you were going to change the cut where the bridge was at, and you were going to do some other things. What did you finally come up with on your track plan, and how many coil cars do you think you'll be able to pull in and out of there?
Well, it's going to be capable of probably 25 or so cars in and out, 25 in, 25 out, give or take. And then I did add another switch that goes into the mill across the creek. It's got a plate girder bridge going into it, and the tracks are just going all which directions once it gets out there, just like the real thing.
Right.
And,
but you did add another bridge too?
I did add a second. Actually, there's a second bridge into the mill with a second switch, and then I think I added 6 more switches inside the mill.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So there's going to be a lot of track in there in that little space, and it'll be a very, very busy place, like a steel mill should be. That's the plan.
That sounds it's going to be a neat addition to your layout. I'm sure.
Yeah, it'll certainly be a neat upgrade, with all the lights and everything, and the lights all over the blast furnace, and doing what a mill should do, with lots of activity, lots of lighting, lots of everything.
Mm-hmm. In fact, back to your point,
yeah,
I think there, as far as the operations on the T-track, yeah, I believe there is going to be some simplified operations compared to last year, but I think Kevin said that he wanted to have provisions for more just continuous running than what we had too. So
okay, great.
Yeah, there will be opportunities for switching operations, but I guess Kevin said there were some people last year that wanted to, just get on and run their train. So I think he's going to provide, like you said, kind of a hybrid of just continuous running, and then for those who want to, some simplified operations. So
yeah, that's to point that out too, like Brad was saying about simplifying it. Most of the people that you're going to get here either like to just run a train or see trains run. They're not into the switching part of it and that kind. But a couple of the guys did want to say, "Can I see you got a local? Can I take the local to listen?" Yep, sure. Here you go. Here's your throttle. And then I got to try to keep up with it, to make sure he gets lined up where he needs to go. But
the thing about the rally, which is nice, is it's for our Iron City members. You know what I mean? So we can morph it to anything we want it to be. We don't have to worry about just running display. And I think that was the great thing behind the rally.
That's the thing too. I will get a lot of people here that want to run trains, but I also have a lot of people that just want to come and see. And I think the T-track last year, just about everybody that came in has never really seen it, firsthand. A lot of the people that came here, and that's that's a nice introduction to it. Like we said last year, there was a young man who just absolutely was thrilled to run it, and that's all part of the game. It's a lot of times down here, there's just trains are just running and people are just talking and having a good time, and and they're asking me a gazillion questions that I can't keep up with and pay attention to everything that's going on around me. So, but if I get a couple guys here that know how to run the layout, then I let them have at it and they can do whatever they want. And
if you keep two of the guys from going upstairs to sit and eat the food.
Yeah, that's the big problem. I have two guys that come and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And then you look around, they're gone, and you don't see them for the rest of the day because they're upstairs feeding your face the whole time.
Todd, can you remind us the time just one more time for the rally at Burnham?
The rally here in Burnham will be from 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. Saturday, April the 11th.
Okay. All right.
And there are some other things that we're working on that may or may not come to fruition, but at minimum, you've got a T-track display to look at, and then of course Todd's awesome N-scale basement empire with at least partially completed new steel mill section that Todd's been working on. Yep. So, and if this other stuff works out, we're still, like I said, we're still in the process of trying to put that together. I don't want to spill the beans on it until we know for sure whether we can make it happen or not. But that's going to be a cool part of it too, that could end up taking place on Sunday, possibly. We just don't know yet because we haven't gotten confirmation. But by all means, if you're within driving distance and would like to stop in, even if you're further away and would like to make the trip, there are some hotels accommodations in Burnham. Not Todd, maybe 2 miles from your house?
About a mile and a half. Yep, 2 miles. Yep, not very far.
So if you're interested in that and making a weekend of it, and you want information about where you might be able to find lodging, feel free to reach out to one of the three of us, either on the Facebook page or through Facebook Direct Messenger, and we can get you the information about that. And we just love to have as many people as we can get there. We had quite a good crowd go through last year, Todd. I remember.
Yeah, we're close to 200. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, we have the T-track set up in Todd's garage, and then down in the basement for the Basement Empire, and it's always a good time. I've said it many times, but you get treated like you're getting together with family for Thanksgiving dinner, and then there's also the big bonus of all the trains. So by all means, if you can join us, we'd love to have you.
Absolutely.
And with that, guys, we're going to have a really good show here. Part 1 with Ron Marsh from Ron's Trains and Things. And we'll be back right after this. Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're looking forward to a great show this evening. Really special guest. We're so glad he's here. And I'll pass over to Brad so he can introduce our special guest for this evening.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. That's great to be back with everybody once again. And with us tonight, we have a special guest who I've had the good fortune of getting to know fairly well through texting and stuff over the past year. But we have with us Ron Marsh from Ron's Trains and Things, another awesome YouTuber, model railroad YouTuber, with, I believe, close to 74,000 subscribers right now. So that's pretty impressive to get that much interest. And you can check out Ron on YouTube. He's also on Facebook. I'm sure we'll give him a chance to share where you can go to see his stuff. But just a lot of really cool model railroad content that Ron creates, and he also has a layout build. I believe it's still in progress, isn't it, Ron? I don't think you're done with yours yet, correct?
Is a layout ever done? No, it's not done.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, without further ado, Ron, welcome. We're so glad to have you here, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate having you, or appreciate you having me, and glad to be here.
Okay, everybody, we have our questions that have been stamped and approved by Brad this evening, and so I'll go ahead and get started. So Ron, it's really good Nice to meet you for the first time. Ron and I have talked on Facebook several times, chatted back and forth, admired his work, but we never really got to talk to each other. And I was hoping to meet him at a couple of shows ago, but I got snowed in, so we didn't go anywhere. So it's really great to have you this evening. And if you can, for our listeners, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Name is Ron Marsh. I guess we've already established that. I live in Southwest Missouri, and I've lived in Missouri most of my life. And I am a newly retired pastor. I was pastor for nearly 40 years, and now I'm doing model railroading and YouTube full time in my retirement. I live here with my wife. I've got 3 grown children. Unfortunately, none of whom right now are model railroaders, but we're still working on them for that. And yeah, I guess that's about it. I grew up on a farm here in west central Missouri, and have stayed. Well, I've ended up anyway pretty close to home over time. I just love it. Every time I get a little further away, something just draws me back. So here I am.
And if I'm not mistaken, Ron, I believe you once told me your wife is a teacher, correct?
Yes, she's a high school English teacher. That's correct.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
I think you mentioned that her kids know you fairly well as the train guy, right?
Yeah, well, it's small town, and the train guy, but more the YouTube guy. I think they're just impressed knowing somebody who has a significant following on YouTube. Uh, I literally cannot walk down the halls of school without hearing somebody say, "Hey, it's Ron of Ron's Trains and Things," which they think is just hilarious. So,
That is awesome.
That is good.
one of my
really
favorite
cool.
stories, actually, when I first started the YouTube channel, and I had some theme music I don't use as much anymore as I used to, but it's this kind of rock beat. And my older son was a senior in high school and played baseball on the high school baseball team. And one of his friends loved the YouTube channel, loved the train thing, but loved the music, and convinced his team manager or the press box or whoever to use my theme song as his walkout music when he went out on the field. So yeah.
Oh, that's great.
That is great. Yes.
So, Ron, before we get into your social media and all your great stuff digitally, let's go back to the basis of the hobby. How did you get into model railroading?
Sure. My story is a little different from a lot of people because I was a rail fan a long time before I even knew the hobby of model railroading existed. I grew up on a farm in between 2 railroad towns on 2 different railroads, and my what I consider my hometown was on the Missouri Pacific, and that's where I went to school. That's where I, counted cars and waved at the conductor on the caboose, growing up. The town on the other side of us was on the GM&O, and from the time I was like 4 or 5 years old, my dad would buy livestock feed supplements from a dealer that literally we unloaded them right off of the boxcar on a team track. And so I kind of grew up as a little kid climbing around on boxcars and picking up. You remember those old the metal seal tags? It was like the old version of a zip tie today that they would seal the cars with. Oh, I collected those things like crazy. So I was just always around, the railroad. It was close by, but I didn't know any model railroaders. I had some train toys as a kid, but I didn't really know that scale model railroading was a thing until I was an adult. I was in my 20s, and my wife and I were in the Orlando, Florida area, and we visited a place that billed itself as the world's largest flea market. And a lot of that was, permanent stores, almost more like a mall than a flea market. And up to that point, I had dabbled in a lot of hobbies. I did some woodworking. I played some golf. I collected a variety of things over the years. But in that flea market, there was a model railroad shop, and they had a couple of small operating layouts in the windows, and I was just awestruck. And we walked in, and that day in that store, I told my wife, I'm trading all my other hobbies for this one. And that's exactly what I did. And so for the past 30 years, I've done nothing else hobby wise except for model railroading, which happened to incorporate several of the other hobbies that I already had anyway. So that worked out. So that's kind of how it got started. I was I was always a Missouri Pacific fan, and so started off collecting Missouri Pacific equipment and planning on building an HO scale Missouri Pacific layout, and that's another story I'm sure we'll get into in a few moments. But that's kind of how I got started in the hobby, and been doing it for 30 years.
So, Ron, what dragged, I should say that. What grabbed your focus to N scale? What was it about N scale that you said, "Hey, I'm sold on this scale. This is what I want to do."
Well, it really was by accident, to tell you the truth. Again, when I started in the hobby, I was young. I was early in my career. I had a young family. Seemed like we moved every 3 years, for that stage of my life. And so I was collecting HO scale stuff with a plan of building an HO scale model railroad, but I could never seem to get that done. And so I collected for a few years there and was just really frustrated not having the ability to get anything built. So one day I was in a hobby shop in Kansas City and was walking by the in scale cabinet where they had all the locomotives. And I thought, maybe I'll try my hand with this in scale thing. I could build something small and portable and, actually get to build something. And then I'll move on to the HO thing whenever I get the opportunity. So I bought my first in-scale locomotive that day. By the way, that locomotive still runs on my layout today. And a little bit of equipment, and I started building a little 4x4 portable layout and doing some scenery and building my first structure kits. And I absolutely fell in love with it. I can't tell you exactly what it was about N scale, other than it felt to me like, and it still does, that you can suggest a lot of detail in N scale that you can kind of trick your eyes into seeing even when it isn't there. I think that was a part of it. But after I built that little layout, I when I had the opportunity to build a larger home layout, I sold all of my HO stuff that I had acquired over time on eBay and invested in N-Scale, and I've been doing N-Scale ever since.
For
So,
me,
Ron, go
that's
ahead. Go ahead,
interesting.
Brett.
Yeah, that's interesting. I that's something that I give quite a bit of thought to too, because my first layout was an HO layout as well, and I started in HO, and then I had a bunch of N scale stuff brought over from Germany from my dad's cousin who was in
Mm,
the service over there, and for me, it was the scenery to track ratio. I guess just looks right for me. I like to model like the Appalachian Mountains, so I need some fairly large mountains, and to me, it just is easier to get that scenery to track ratio right in N scale than it is in other scales. I mean, I've not that other scales don't do a good job of doing it. I just for me, it's easier to get the look I want, I guess. But it is
sure.
it is interesting to me why the reasons why people end up in the scales they end up in. But that
Well, and the old standby answer, why N-Scale is, well, you can fit so much more into the same space.
yep,
I have you hear different people talking about what their focus or what their favorite part of a railroad or what they like to model, and my problem is I like to model all of it. But I was always really interested in running mainline trains. That's not all that I run, but I wanted to be able to run at least a believable length of train, and that's just so much easier to do in N scale than it is in HO.
for sure.
And having grown up on a farm, one of my kind of key features that's really, really important to me is where the farm meets the rails, which in part means grain elevators. And boy, you can really build some grain elevators in N scale. I mean, you can really
Yeah,
create the size. In fact,
and
I
I,
just finished one a couple of months ago that is kind of my pride and joy of my layout now. One of the
yeah.
large grain elevators from Saginaw, Texas.
It is awesome. Yeah, I've seen pictures of it, Pat. If you haven't seen it, it's pretty impressive, I'll tell you. That it
Oh, I
is very
remember
cool.
him. I was tracking him building that. And I was just like, wow, that is nice.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it took me 3 attempts to actually get it built,
Yeah.
but we finally got it. Finally
Yeah.
got it.
So this is a good segue over to tell us about the name of your layout, how you got the plan for it, what was the main, ingredient to say, hey, I'm going to build a layout. This is what I want, and this is what the time frame I want and the era I want.
Sure. Well, let me back up and tell you a little backstory to that. Because like I said, I grew up along the Missouri Pacific, so that was my first love. That little portable layout was a Missouri Pacific layout, and I always loved Missouri Pacific. In fact, I lived most of my life within a rock's throw of the Missouri Pacific Sedalia subdivision. Well, it was Union Pacific, but by the time I was older, but lived along that line for years, and I love that. I love the history of that line. This is a little bit of a tangent, but I just find it fascinating. I lived for a few years in a little bitty town called Otterville, Missouri, which, if you know Western Missouri at all, it's about 10 miles east of Sedalia. And during the Civil War, just before the Civil War, there were three railroads that were racing their way across Missouri, hoping to get the bid to build the Transcontinental Railroad. And the Missouri Pacific was the central one, was probably the front runner had the Civil War not happened. When the Civil War broke out, they started in St. Louis, they were building west, and they had made it to Otterville, the little town where I lived, but they ceased new building because it was all they could do to protect the track they had from sabotage during the war. And so they would look for some land in Otterville for that someone would grant them to build a yard and some steam shops and make a terminus there. And Otterville people were more than willing to sell them some land, but nobody was willing to grant them land. But just 10 miles on down the road in Sedalia, Missouri, somebody granted them land. So they built 10 more miles of track. And long story short, today Sedalia is a railroad town of about 35,000 people, and Otterville still has about the same 450 that it had in 1860. Missed a great opportunity. But having lived there is really interesting because you can actually see some of the old earthworks that were built around a couple of bridges in the Otterville area to protect the track during the Civil War. I mean, it's really kind of fascinating railroad/Civil War historical area. So that was my first plan, was to model Missouri Pacific, and I did that for a while. And then in the mid 1990s, but before I started into N-scale, I moved to a town in northern Missouri, Carrollton, Missouri, which was on the Santa Fe Marceline subdivision. And of course, this was right after the BNSF merger. And now I didn't really have any history with Santa Fe or with Burlington Northern. BNSF was brand new, but I was absolutely awestruck during that time period because watching that busy main line through town was like watching 7 different railroads because of all the merger paint schemes, and just, I mean, every locomotive looked different, looked unique, and I just kind of fell in love with it. Plus that orange and green paint scheme of the early BNSF, those are some of my favorite colors. That didn't hurt anything. So I was interested in that. And then from there, we moved to Fort Worth, Texas for the second time. We lived there for a total of 6 years at 2 different times. And I lived in a northern suburb of Fort Worth and drove through Saginaw, Texas to and from work every day for 3 years, which it was, that's BNSF and Union Pacific territory. And I just thought Saginaw was a place that absolutely begged to be modeled as far as I was concerned. Of course, they have 2 of what at one time were the largest grain elevators in the world. You can see them for miles around. And so I was very familiar with the elevators in Saginaw. But as I got to driving, around the area and doing some rail fanning, I discovered North Yard, which was a division point yard on the Burlington Northern, more of a local yard now, but a large local yard, but small enough that you could reasonably model it, and just a variety of rail served industries right along a main line. It was absolutely perfect for modeling. So I began to make plans then and take photographs and draw possible track plans. And it was then after we moved from there back to Missouri a couple of years later that I began to build my first version of what I call the Saginaw and Western, which is really based on the BNSF's Wichita Falls subdivision from Fort Worth to Wichita Falls and then extending on west, which is what I model today. Started this layout, gosh, like 14 years ago, and you wouldn't look at it and know that because the progress has been slow. There's been a couple of times when I literally just laid off of it for, at one point, a couple of years. We just had some pressing things happening in life, and I had to get away from it. But now, since retirement, we're blowing and going again, starting to make some progress and starting to make some more video about that as well. So I'm sure I left some things out there, but I think that gives you a sense of where the layout comes from.
So did you say the BNSF then is the main railroad that you model on your layout then?
Yes, BNSF is the main railroad, but I have interchanges with, because I love interchange traffic. I have interchanges with Union Pacific, with the Fort Worth and Western, and with the Wichita, Tillman, and Jackson. So I have at least yards and interchange tracks representing all three of those as well.
You mentioned the paint scheme on BNSF. To me, that it harkens back to the Great Northern.
Yes. Yeah, especially that very first, that H1, what they call the pumpkins. Yeah, really look like Great Northern livery for sure.
That was always one of my favorite paint schemes, the Great Northern. So I am glad BNSF has kind of at least paid some tribute to that. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah. And Ron, to go back to your initial idea about the layout, a lot of people out east do the same thing with Conrail as it was purchasing, or the government came in and took over all the different lines in the East Coast. The same thing, that 1976 to 1980, you could throw anything, on a model railroad layout, and it will look right because it was actually, the more research I do, I found out that Lehigh Valley was all the way out in Indiana. I was like, that's impossible, right? But it was out there.
Yeah.
And the same thing for you. So what time frame again are you kind of locked in on, or do you have like a certain date to present, or how do you do your era?
Well, I've changed that several times. I keep bumping it because I run across something that I want to run that doesn't fit the era, so I just had to broaden it out a little bit. I call it around 2008 to 2010, although if I was really honest about the locomotives that I run and a few other detail items, probably more like 2008 to present would be, or 2008 to about 2015 would probably be a more realistic time frame there.
Yeah. Isn't it funny when you see something, you're like, that layout's going to have to go this to the left a couple of years or to the right a couple of years because I need to have that on the layout.
Too good to pass up. Yeah, for sure.
And Ron, what type of yard do you have? What kind of industries do you have on your layout? And is it more switching? Is it more mainline? I know you talked about how you really enjoyed mainline, but when you're building this and you're planning, what are some things that you're trying to make sure that are on your layout?
Right. When it comes to mainline versus switching, I tried to make sure that I had a healthy amount of both. The layout is designed to operate, and it would be a small operating crew of about 5 people. The heart of the layout is North Yard in Saginaw. It's 2-deck layout, and my whole lower deck is basically Fort Worth and Saginaw, which Saginaw is a northern suburb of Fort Worth. And so, North Yard is 16 feet. It's most of my lower deck, and that really is the heart of the layout. The trains that run through there all drop and pick up cars, and really most of them, for all practical purposes, terminate and then begin again from there, going east or west into staging. And then for the most part, I have a couple of just fictitious industries that I added for the sake of interest, but most of the industries that are on the lower deck are real industries that were there in the 2000 aughts. We've got a couple of big grain elevators at Atterbury Grain, which is right in North Yard, and then my big elevator F that I just built, which is further north in Saginaw, and those are kind of my pride and joy. But there's also, and some of these, like one of my favorite industries, just because the structure is really interesting, is Victory Blue makes Victory Blue diesel exhaust fluid, DEF. But the structure where that is manufactured at one time was a feed mill processing plant. So it looks like it's got a grain elevator kind of attached to the end, or at least an elevator leg. It literally does. But they use the structure, and the tank cars go right through the old loading shed to where they load and unload. And then I've got some just warehouse areas. I got a grocery warehouse, I got a Mattel warehouse that are rail served. One industry, the Coke Industries, which handles asphalt and other construction chemicals coming out of the refineries up to be distributed from there. And I have a little bit of passenger service. I have a model, a version of Fort Worth's Central Station, and so I do have an Amtrak that runs across the layout and stops there in Fort Worth. Oh, yeah, I knew I was forgetting one important one. Trinity Railcar is there on the north end of Fort Worth, which in the area that I modeled, they built air slide cover hoppers. Today they build tank cars in that facility, and so that's an interesting thing because there have been a couple of companies, mostly primarily Intermountain, has made some of those Trinity air slide covered hoppers in undecorated versions. So I was able to get a couple of undecorated and weather them in such a way as to look like covered hoppers that are under construction, and I can both take newly built covered hoppers out of that industry as well as delivering materials for building coiled steel and wheel sets and all kinds of things like that to that industry. That's the lower deck. The upper deck does also have it. My model of Wichita Falls is on the upper deck. So there's a small yard there and a handful of industries, yet another grain elevator there, and also my interchange yard with the Wichita, Tillman, and Jackson is there in Wichita Falls. There's actually still a team track in Wichita Falls, and there's at least two industries in the city that, at least in 2005, were still unloading cars off of a team track. One of them was a lumber dealer that unloads center beam flat cars full of lumber off that team track. So I put that on the layout. And then this area where my layout is, when I first moved here, was actually a family room. My kids were still living at home, and part of the lease agreement with my household property manager, otherwise known as my wife, was that if I was going to take up a big part of the family room, I had to build some mountain scenery. And so the far west end of the upper deck is some fictitious mountain scenery that probably represents more Colorado than New Mexico, where it should, but that's all right. That's where I just have to tell people it's my layout, it's my railroad.
That's right. That's right.
And happy wife, happy life, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and since then, of course, my kids are all grown. My youngest son's a senior in college now, and so in 2000, my youngest son was a senior in high school at the time, and of course, the whole COVID, the shutdown, all of the everything was happening. We had wanted to do some remodeling work in our basement, and believe it or not, my wife is actually the one who had the idea. They said, the kids are all gone except for, why don't we move the TV and the gaming system upstairs? In 6 months, he's going to go to college anyway, and you can expand the layout into that area. So we replaced the flooring down here, and I tore down my poorly operating original Helix and extended both decks of the layout 12 feet up a partition that I added here, built a new helix, and honestly, I've got all the railroad that I want as somebody who's building it, maintaining it by myself, but that extra 12 feet literally was a game changer as far as the layout was concerned. It turned the industries in Saginaw from what seemed much like an afterthought to some really viable industries. And I was able to add. I modeled the little town of Bowie, Texas. I was able to expand that, get it out of the back pocket of Wichita Falls, and actually be able to build some open country North Texas scenery that I didn't have room for before. And I've really been enjoying that. So
Hey, some follow-up questions to the layout here. We're still talking our layout with Ron here. Ron, Brad and I like to do a lot of this concept where it's just a train passing through your layout. There's no really industry per se in the layout. It's just, a distance between one area to the other, and you get the rail fan, these trains that might not, stop within your
Sure.
industries. Is that something you guys you're doing with oil and gas or anything like that, with being in the Texas and the area like that?
Yeah, coal primarily. I have 4-unit coal trains, and so with each operating session, I would have 2 loaded coal trains going one direction and 2 empties going the other. Those run all the way across the layout. I have the capacity to run some unit grain trains as well. And then at present, I don't really have the staging room for other like manifest trains that would run, but it would be very reasonable for. Well, I forgot one other thing too. Intermodal, of course, the Fort Worth area is right next door to the huge Alliance Intermodal Yard, and I have intermodal traffic that runs across the layout and into a small staging in the middle of the layout that represents Alliance Texas. So yeah, I have some through stuff running intermodal as well. The layout's not really set up for continuous run, although you can continuous run. Both of my staging yards, upper and lower, have a balloon track around them. You can't just turn a train on and let it run. You got to stay with it because you got to throw some switches to make that balloon track. But you certainly can continuous run, and I like to do that for guests whenever they come as well. Kids always like to see the trains run on the layout, so
That's right.
we try to do some of that for them.
So, Ron, what are you using to control the layout? Are you a DCC guy? What are you using? And then when you're doing operations, are you doing printout? Are you doing cards? What are you doing? Controlling it, and what do you do for operations?
Sure. It is run by DCC, and I always say this with a little bit of trepidation. I always dread this question a little bit. When I first built the previous version of this layout before we moved, I was young and poor, and MRC's Prodigy Advance had just come out, and it was the cheapest full DCC system on the market, and so I bought it. And then a few years later, they upgraded to a Prodigy Advanced Squared, and I was able to send my unit back and have them upgrade the software. And I've just continued to upgrade the software, so I'm still running MRC Prodigy Advanced Squared, and I run it with wireless throttles. And I'll be honest with you, there are a few quirks to it, but for the most part, it runs as well as. I mean, I've used about every system out there on a different operating sessions in different places, and there are some things I'd like to see done differently. I'd like to see them improve. They're supposedly working on some upgrades and the primary thing is the way it runs right now is you have to use those great big hammerhead kind of throttles. They're coming out with supposedly some wireless, smaller, handheld kinds of throttles, which would be a huge improvement. But so anyway, yeah, I'm running MRC Prodigy Advanced Squared, and I can't complain about it too much. And again, like I said, every system that I've used has its pluses and minuses. So as far as car forwarding is concerned, I use car cards and waybills. I played a little bit with JMRI switch lists. I've done both, and I see pluses and minuses to both. But for me, I kind of enjoy the car cards and waybills, and I can't tell you why. There's just something about that tactile experience of dealing with the waybills that I enjoy. I'm in an interesting place right now because after the expansion of my layout, it not only expanded the industries, but it literally quadrupled the amount of rolling stock that I needed and that I have on my layout, which meant that I had to completely reset my operations. And I've discovered that resetting operations for 150 pieces of rolling stock is one thing, and setting them for 500 pieces of rolling stock is a completely other thing. And so I'm still kind of in the process of getting all of that in order, getting all those waybills, getting cars where they need to be for all those sessions. But we're getting there. I think there was another part of that question that I already forgot. What was it?
No, those were the two.
Oh,
Those
okay,
were the
good.
two.
All right, very good.
I did want to follow up because Brad and I were always researching DCC and what's everybody doing.
Sure.
You're the first person I've heard that sends their equipment back in for upgrades and they work with you on that. So that's pretty neat. I haven't heard that. Most of the time, people just go out and buy the next gadget or something like that. But that's kind of nice that your system's in place. You have to send some stuff back for an upgrade, and then you get it back without having to redo everything.
It's nice, except for that time period while you're waiting for it to get there, get upgraded, and get back. But
Yes, this is true.
well, and I'll be honest, I've considered changing. There are some great systems out there, and I've looked at it several times. But I mean, I wouldn't. Wireless throttles are absolutely non-negotiable. I got to have wireless throttles. I'm just not going to go any other way. And to get a system equivalent to what I have with wireless throttles up and going is just prohibitively expensive. I mean, we're talking not $1,000, but a few thousand by the time I would get all of the throttles and all of the stuff to change over to something else. And so, it would have to be pretty serious flaw that I was dealing with to make me want to make that kind of expenditure at this point when I could spend that on other parts of the layout. So.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to chime in with. If the system's doing everything you need it to do, there's no point in changing just for the sake of change, is there?
Sure. Right.
And I had a question too. I have only used the MRC system, and I'm not even sure if it's the same system you have. I've only used it once, and it was at a guy's layout in Western PA. And I mean, I saw nothing wrong with it. You mentioned the wireless. Does it have a proprietary wireless system that only MRC throttles can connect to, or does it have Wi-Fi, and any Wi-Fi, you could connect your phone to it and use engine driver? That's
the older system, which is where I am right now, is a proprietary. I'm sorry, my dog's going nuts upstairs.
That's okay.
The older system that I have has.
Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second. We'll ask that question again. That way Brad can edit this. Yeah.
Okay.
Someone just came to the door, I think.
It might have, yeah. That would be our dog. Our dog goes nuts if somebody walks on the road out in front of the yard. Even they don't even have to come to the door.
Ours does too, and I'm not sure what it's a. Well, I don't know. We'll tell that story later, but anyway.
Okay,
so
Brad,
you want me to re-ask that question then?
Yeah. I'll count it down for you. That way you can have some edit.
Okay.
5, 4.
So, Ron, you mentioned you use an MRC system. I personally have only used that once. It was at a gentleman's layout in Western PA that I was fortunate enough to be able to go operate on, and I found that it did what it needed to do. Like I said, I don't have that much familiarity with it, but the one question I did want to ask is about the wireless system. Is it a proprietary wireless system that only an MRC throttle can connect to, or does it have the capability to have any Wi-Fi throttle, like a engine driver app phone, or even some of the TCS has their own Wi-Fi throttles now? Which type does the MRC system use?
Well, the advanced squared, the system that I have currently is a proprietary system, and it has its own wireless connection. They do have a Wi-Fi connector that you can plug into. It's kind of an aftermarket plug-in. The new system that they're developing is supposed to have Wi-Fi built in, and you can use, like I said, you can use engine driver, use your cell phone, and that'll be a big plus. But so I guess the answer to your question is both. What I have is still the proprietary system, but the new system, and I'm on the list. I'm supposed to be one of the guys that gets to test this thing whenever it first comes out.
Oh, very
whenever
cool.
they have it ready. So I'm excited about that, but I've been kind of waiting for that for about a year now. So we'll see exactly when that happens. But I'm looking forward to that. Again, that's two good reasons, that the built-in Wi-Fi connection and the smaller handheld throttles both be great improvements to the system that I have.
Yeah, and I do find that is one area that I think is helping this hobby grow is people being able to I personally don't like to use a phone to control my trains. I like the tactile feel
Yeah.
of a throttle with a knob, but I have guys that come here and there's two younger guys and they don't want anything to do with a throttle. They just want to connect their phone. So I have a Wi-Fi module with my system too, and I do
I
think
know.
for younger guys, that is a big selling point.
I know a guy on YouTube who he's actually using the DCCEX, the Arduino based home built DCC system. And I literally saw him on a video the other day operating his trains with a game controller. And I'm just like, more power to you. That's great. I'm glad you can do that. That is not for me. I'm gonna
Yeah.
pass on that one, but I'm glad to
Yes.
have the ability.
That's what I run on mine, Ron. I run a DCCEX, but mine is due to the fact I have a pretty large DC fleet still, so that gives you the ability to run both at the same time on different tracks. So yeah, everyone's got something different, and it's always great to talk about DCC because it's wide open. There's so many different things. So, Ron, when we want to talk about, we have one more question about your layout before we go into the second half of our show, where we start talking to you about the YouTube and social media and how you're influencing all these future model railroaders. If you could rail fan one section of your layout and you just feel like it's just your favorite part, you like to take photos there, it catches the train, it catches everything about your layout. What's your favorite section of the layout?
Well, at this stage, as far as a rail fanning spot, I think, and people who are familiar with the YouTube channel are very familiar with it because it's the mountain area that's right behind my head whenever I do the intros and closings to all of my videos, that mountain section. And the reason why it's my favorite spot is because it's the most complete scenery spot on the layout. So, I do a lot of photography there. But I think really right now, one of my favorite spots, about a year ago, I did a little bitty expansion, about a 16-inch expansion to a little interchange yard, Fort Worth and Western interchange yard. And it's a little bitty spot. So I just went all out and scenic it and did everything that I wanted to do to that little area. And I just love the way it came out. And so if there's a spot that I just like to sit and stare at, in fact, it's right here beside where my computer desk is, so I literally can turn and look at it right now. And I really enjoy that spot as well. I know there are going to be some others as the layout progresses. I started a farm scene a year or so ago that I need to get back to that I think will be one of my favorites as it progresses. It's just not there yet. But yeah, I think the best rail fanning spot is probably that mountain area up there at what would be the far western end of the layout on the upper deck. Yeah.
Okay, well, Ron, that's all the time we have for part one. So we'll be right back after this. Hey, everybody. I'm back here this evening with our co-hosts, Todd and Brad. And guys, we just had a great show. Ron Marsh is something else. The next broadcast we'll do part two and really talk about his social media. But Brad, it's always great to talk model railroading and the models and the details. And I know at the beginning of the episode, we were able to talk to Todd a little bit about his projects that he's working on. And it's just great to talk model railroading. It's the nuts and bolts of it. I think people like that. And it's so interesting to hear everyone's different angles and approaches. Todd, you've been in modeling for so many years, and yet there's always something new technique that you're working on. I know Brad's always working on something. I know I'm always trying something for the first time. So it's good to hear that, we're not the only ones suffering. We're working and building on layouts.
Yeah, I've never tried the static grass part of it again, but I've always used the foam and the ground foams and things like that. And the static grass looks so good and so awesome. And so,
yeah, the thing that I was going to mention, we talked about that earlier, is with there's like 3 or 4 different lengths of static grass, and really only 2 of those are appropriate for N scale. Some of the larger sizes, you have grass that's like 20 foot tall, and
no, don't worry.
But there are 2 different sizes that look good. I think it's
it's what, 2 millimeter or 3 millimeter or something like that.
I think I have 1 millimeter and 3 millimeter for my flocking, but yeah, there might even be 2. I don't know, but yeah, it is a neat way to get some ground texture. But yeah, I agree with Pat. It's always cool to talk about new things that come out in the hobby, because it's always advancing. I mean, Todd, if you compare it from now to back in the 70s or earlier when we got started,
some of the layouts were so pathetic. It was like, oh my God.
Well, especially in N scale, my gosh, the engines. The joke is the only way you could run some of those early engines was 300 miles an hour in reverse, and that's not too far from the truth. And scenery materials have come. I go back through old model railroad. I'm going right now through a lot of my old model railroader magazines, and I'm going to probably try to sell some. But I go back and look at some of the layouts that I just ogled over back in the 80s, and you think, man, it's still, I mean, it doesn't look bad, but compared to, you can really tell it's dated, because
look at the Virginia and Ohio is a perfect example of that. It was it was all lichen with basically sawdust, materials and stuff. And then as things got better, he upgraded, but
and then puffball trees, which I still maintain are okay for the background, but there's so much
if they're done right.
But for stuff that you like out in front, close up to the tracks, the stuff like we've been doing, you go out and pick your own dried stuff. I go to Hobby Lobby and get dried plant material, and and you stick the ground foam to it and paint it. It just looks like it just makes for such a much better. I mean, to me, they look like super trees, which are as far as the best commercially
fragile.
Oh yeah, and I put them on my T-Track modules, which of course it can you take a lot of damage in transporting them, but to me they just look so much better than
what we had. Goldenrod and mugwort that I picked here. I picked a lot of across the street this year, and I got a little place out the back road here that I go. That stuff done right, man, it just looks so good.
Yep, it does, and that's a lot of we did get into a lot of that stuff about what Ron's doing on his layout. He's got a really nice layout that's a work in progress. I know it's a 2-deck layout, I'm pretty sure. So he's got a helix in that, which presents they always present an engineering challenge to get them sloped right and to make sure you have wide enough radius. But he's got some really neat scenic areas. He talked about one in particular that I believe, Pat, he told us was a deal that he had to make with his wife so he could get the space. He wanted a mountainous area on that layout, so he had to do that. That was the trade-off for getting the space down there. I think he's got it over me, because I had to build a kitchen. I had to renovate a whole kitchen in order to have space downstairs. But yeah, it was interesting to talk to Ron, not only about what he's currently doing, but we did even get into a little bit with him about his past history and his initial entry into the greatest hobby on earth. So it was enjoyable, and Ron always has a lot of interesting stuff to say, and it was just a pleasure to sit back and listen, but to also be able to interact and ask him some questions about what he's doing with that layout of his.
Absolutely. And Brad, if our listeners want to talk to Ron, or if they want to talk to Todd or yourself, they can do that on our Iron City Facebook page. That's the Iron City InScale Facebook page, and we will answer your questions. You can direct mail us, or you can post on our page. We love posts. That way, more people can add to the post and answer your questions. We've had several people do that lately, and we've always had really good comments and replies. Brad, if they want to hear us, they can hear us at Apple Podcast. They can hear us at YouTube, Podbean, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Player FM, Listen Notes, Podchaser, and Boomplay. And with that, Brad, our show's coming to an end. I'll give you the closing thoughts.
Yeah, thank you once again, everybody. We appreciate you tuning in to listen to us. Just that means so much to us that you guys do that. A big thank you to Todd for co-hosting with us tonight. It's always great to get together and talk with Todd. And of course, a big, big thanks to Ron Marsh from Ron's Trains and Things for being the guest with us on this. And we, once again, just to make sure everybody is aware, this will not be the last episode with Ron. We will be doing another one with him where we transition from talking about his modeling and his layout to his what he's become most famous for, probably his YouTube channel, Ron's Trains and Things, where he has a lot of interesting informational videos and tips. He, as I mentioned before, it's tools, tips, and techniques, I think is his focus. And he's got quite the following on there. I believe it's around 74,000 YouTube followers, YouTube subscribers. So just like we were excited to have DJ from DJ's Trains earlier, and I think DJ led the year off for us. We were able to talk to another really interesting YouTuber. So thank you to Ron for being here with us, and we'll look forward to the next installment. And then just one final reminder about those events coming up very soon, a couple weeks after this airs, less than a couple weeks. We have the Clinton Central show at Woodward Township Fire Hall in central Pennsylvania between Jersey Shore and Williamsport. And then April 11th, just a couple weeks after that, we'll be at Todd's place down in Burnham for the rally in Burnham. Hope to see as many people at both of those events as we can possibly get. So having said that, we'll sign off from here. And once again, sincerely thank everybody for joining us for another episode of the Iron City Roundhouse Report. All right, rail fans, that's all the steam we've got for this edition of the Iron City Roundhouse Report. Until next time, keep those gauges green, your couplers connected, and may your layouts always run smoothly. Happy railroading.